Glory to Jesus Christ. Morning. Today we celebrate All Saints. It's kind of a catch-all for all the saints of the church, some of whom do not have feasts. There are thousands of saints that don't have their own individual feasts. So today we celebrate All Saints. It is the week right after Pentecost. Today I also would like to use and have this opportunity to express that I know some of you have heard, we've talked about it, that there are now about 7 million Orthodox Christians in this country. But I want to offer a warning to each one of them, to each one of the Orthodox Christians that are catechumens, those who have become Orthodox Christians. The warning is this: stay in your lane. Stay in your place. Because inevitably, at one point or another, every single person is going to look at another person in a church, and they're going to think that they're better than that person. They've read a couple books. They've come to church. They might serve in the altar, and they think that they're better than everybody else. And sometimes they even get so froggy that they think they're better than the priest. They think that they're better than the bishops. They think that they're better than the patriarch. At some point, inevitably, everybody will have that temptation. St. John Chrysostom says that a place will not save us if we do not carry out the will of God. What is that place? The church. This building will not save you unless you're carrying the will of God. Yes, when we are here, we believe that it becomes heaven and earth at one time. We believe that heaven and earth join. But when you bring the world with you, you start to judge other people. You start to criticize other people. We're supposed to judge. Every one of us judges. But the judgment that goes over into criticism, that's where it starts getting dangerous. You read a couple books, like I said, by St. John Chrysostom, and therefore you're an expert. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not an expert in anything. I hardly know anything. I've lived for 50 years today. I've lived for 50 years. And 2,000 years, there's no way I have enough time to read every single book and every single thing that anybody has written. And if you go and ask any of the church fathers, are you an expert? They would look at you and laugh. And they would say, I am chief among sinners, just like St. Paul said. I'm the chief among sinners. There was an interesting quote, a beautiful quote that I read by St. John Constant. He says, the devil tries in every way to conceal from us the good in others and present them to us in a negative light. Take heed and be aware of ever looking at others through his eyes, the devil's eye. It's important for us to look at people through Christ's eyes. Because if you actually pray that you look at people through Christ's eyes, you will start to see Christ in other people. But when you see people through the devil's eyes, you will see other people in a negative light. And you will judge them because they are sinning differently than you, and you ignore your own sin. There was a story of a monk who had gone into a monastery, and while he was there, 5 of the monks out of the 9 irritated him, extremely irritated him. He says, that's it, I'm done. He goes on to the next monastery. Goes to the second monastery. He now sees 3 monks that irritate him. He gets up, he leaves, and goes to the next monastery. He goes to the third monastery. He now sees 6 monks that irritate him, and he gets up and goes to the 4th monastery. And at the 4th monastery, he finally said to himself, let me look at myself. Let me pay attention to what I am doing. And he writes on a piece of paper, I will endure all for the sake of Jesus Christ. And every single time one of those monks irritated him, he would pull out that paper and he would say, I will endure all for the sake of Jesus Christ. If we endure all for the sake of Jesus Christ, we will look at everybody equally. Because Jesus says, everybody's fallen short of the glory of God. Every single person has. When Jesus came, he literally was looking at us through his own eyes. And every single person he encountered were sinners. There's not one person. I don't understand how God did not revile and throw out fire and destroy everybody at that time. But his mercy endures forever. His grace endures forever. His love is a love that knows no bounds. All he requests is what Jesus says today that Matthew recounts. I have given a similar sermon when I've talked about the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule I usually talk about with other married couples, and I've used it myself. When I was working in Medicare, when I was working in United Healthcare, I had to teach people the 80-20 rule. The insurance covered 80 and the person was responsible for 20% of their payment. That's the Medicare, that's how Medicare works. And I translated that now when I look at my wife and I check her and see her. I was about to say check her out. I do that pretty often too. But when I look at her, oftentimes there's about 80% of my wife that I absolutely adore. She came out to look at me too. Don't tempt me. There was about 80% of her that I absolutely adored. And then 20% of her I can't stand. And you know what happens? The enemy, he hands me a magnifying glass. And he magnifies that 20% over and over and over again. And by the time he's done, he has magnified that 20% so much that it seems like it's unbearable to me, and it becomes bigger and larger and more massive than the 20%, the 80% that I love about her. That's the same thing you got to remember when you come to the church. If you actually sit down and get to know people, there will be about 20% of that person that you will not like. Every one of us struggles with something. Trust me. Everybody that sat in the chair right there, and I sit there, that's confessed, those things I do not like about that person. I do not like the sinfulness of that person, and nor should anybody like the sinfulness of me. But that 20% of that person does not overshadow the love that I have for each person. It never should overshadow the love that we have for people. Because if we take the time to actually look at people the way we're supposed to, we will end up understanding what Christ saw in us. But again, the enemy comes in and he multiplies and he confuses and he drives us away and he steers us away from the church sometimes. 7 million Orthodox Christians. And they come in and the pride sets in. The pride and the egotism and the selfishness set in. I can't stand being in this church, people tell me. My church, my Orthodox faith, and all these people are doing something that I do not like, therefore I'm going to leave. Been done to me many times, sir. Throughout my even 10 years as a priest, I've heard that over and over and over again. I said, well, about you, about the things that you're doing. Because I always liken sin to an echo. I've been thinking about this for the last few weeks. When I sin, it's an echo, right? It echoes throughout time. If I go and cheat on my wife, what will happen? It will echo and it will hurt her. Inevitably, somebody will find out. And it will hurt the church. It will hurt my child. It will hurt the people that know me. And therefore, that sin now starts to echo. And then when the people start to judge me, you know what is going to happen? They will also echo that sin. Because they compound it. That's what the enemy does. That's what he did to Eve. He confused her. He caught her in a spiral of his conversation. It's not like he appeared with pitchfork and horns. Remember that the angel of light is an angel of light. He comes in a way that makes sense to us. And oftentimes, he comes to us in the form of our spouses and our children and the people at the church. The enemy fills us all with egotism. And if we are not aware of this, we will begin to break down our marriages and we will begin to break down our churches. But the 80-20% principle is always sound. Because if you do not be aware of those things, the enemy will magnify what other people do in your life. And then you'll start to ignore your own sin. This is the problem that I've had with the LGBT movement and the transgender movement. Yes, I don't agree with that ideology, but you know what we do? Those people. And then I go home and I'm a glutton. And then I go home and I'm looking at things I'm not supposed to look at on the computer. And then I go home and I'm fighting with my spouse. I might go home and beat my children, but yet I can point my finger at other people because their sin is different than mine. But what does Jesus say today in Matthew? And remember, you must understand when Matthew's writing, all these gospel writers are writing, they're writing from a personal perspective. These guys are writing, Matthew, when he's writing this, he's writing it as a tax collector that was redeemed. He was hated. The people hated him, including the other disciples at the beginning. Hated him. And he's writing down Jesus' words, and he's trying to teach these 12 guys, right? Most of the focus that Jesus was having is on the 12 guys. Because they were going to go out into the world and teach the people. They were going to go out and be fishers of men. Yes, we stream our services every week. A lot of people get to hear the sermons. But if I didn't have that on, the message would be for the people here at St. Nectarios. Because I expect you all to go out and take my Petroheli as a part of you. Because you represent something greater than even myself. You represent Jesus Christ. You may have darkness in your life. You may have sinfulness of your life. But that's why the prayer says, Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Focusing on me. Because I have to fix myself. I have to be the example. I can't come in here and talk. I never hardly talk about gluttony. But even though I'm a glutton, you can tell. I'm overweight. I'm a fat guy. I struggle all the time with that. I've been struggling with it all my life. Because I've always looked at myself as a broken person that wasn't worthy of anybody. As I was growing up, none of the girls wanted me. They always looked at me as a friend, but never as a boyfriend. And then I would turn to myself and I'd say to myself, what's wrong with me? And then I'd eat. And then I'd make jokes and I talk dirty and I smoke weed and I drink and I do all these things to be accepted. But then as I started turning to God, you know what happened? All those guys that used to love me, that we would shake each other's hands and say, hey brother, I'm going to be friends with you forever. You know where they are? Nowhere in my life. Because Jesus says it today. If you love me, remember that wives and children and family and everybody else, they were all going to disappear on you at some point, because if you're taking your faith seriously, the world's going to hate you, Jesus says, because it hated me first. Jesus says today, Matthew again, remember the tax collector, despised. He says, therefore, whoever confesses me before men, him I will also confess before my Father in heaven. What does that word confess mean? The person that goes out into the world and proclaims that I am a Christian. How do we do that? By wearing our cross on the outside of our shirt. I've seen plenty of people do that. I've seen plenty of people wearing their cross on the shirt, and then they're telling dirty jokes, they're swearing and doing everything vile. Is that proclaiming, confessing Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? If you're going to live your life, not only do you have to be that way here in the walls of the church, but when you go home into your home, that church also too needs you to live a life that is exemplary. Because we are called to be exemplary people. All of us have darkness. I have darkness in my life. I'm trying so hard to root it out of my life. I'm trying hard to pry that part of that poison out of me by drawing it out, by confessing, and by coming to the church and trying to become the man and holding myself responsible for my own sinfulness. And as I do that, I begin to experience something that I never experienced before, the love of God. Because the love of God is the only way that I'm going to become that new man. But it says, Jesus tells us, right, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. But most of the time, we don't love ourselves. We actually hate ourselves. And every single time we hate ourselves, we sin. Every single time, without exception, there's no gray area. You either follow God or you follow the enemy. There's no gray area. And Jesus says, if you deny me before men, you know what he's going to do when he goes up to the Father? I'm going to deny you before the Father. If that doesn't strike your heart, I don't know what else will. I mean, it's a promise. It's not like Jesus is arbitrarily making these statements. He's talking to these guys, and he's telling these guys, you need to pull yourselves up from the depths of wherever you're at. Because you have these guys, and I'm sure they all were broken, but you have these guys, one was a tax collector, they're fishermen, they were rude, they were angry. Those guys could be likened to construction workers and pipeline guys and all those guys, right? Mechanics. They were probably talking dirty and probably going to the bar and doing all those things. But who did Jesus pick to go out into the world? He picked regular people. And those regular people, you know who hated them? The religious authorities. The religious authorities hated those guys because they were not them. They were there because those guys thought that they had the corner on holiness. And they were the farthest from it. They were the farthest from it. And these guys that thought they had nothing and they were the farthest from God, they were the closest to him. When you learn how to love people, and you learn how to come here and see people the way you're supposed to see people, you will begin to drop the metal out of your heart. It's steel. The heart is like a piece of iron. The iron sharpens iron, right? You hear this in the prophet Isaiah, a friend sharpening, right? The iron sharpens iron. What does that mean? Does it mean if I'm sitting next to David that I'm sharpening his iron? No! When you guys come in, I'm clashing with you. I'm challenging you. I'm telling you what you're doing is wrong. And when you come in and you confess that I said about this and about this and about this, man, Father, I didn't even think about those things. I know. That's why I get paid the big bucks. I know. You didn't think about those things. And a lot of times when I talk to my spiritual, I didn't talk about those things either. I talk to Metropolitan Greg. He's my spiritual father. And when I said, Metro, here, Eminence, what do you have to say to me? When I have something to tell you, I'll tell you. Okay. But when I go to him, when I do confession, it's kind of sparse. But man, I drill down deep as possible when I do confession. I think about every single day of all the things that I do, because that poison left unattended will poison my whole self. The 20% that I say that you're not supposed to judge, but the 20% is the part of us that we're trying to root out of our life. And then when you have spouses that refuse to give in to their husbands, that's children who refuse to give in to their children, no wonder our children are under rebellion. Because the hierarchy of everything is turned upside down. Jonathan Pajot, I think some of you have probably heard him. He said at one time, the circuses, right? At one time, the circuses were outside the city. The strange and the freaks and the weird and everything else was outside the city. And the normalcy was inside the city. But he said, now, you know what's happened? Now the strange and the freakiness and the stupidness and the irritation and all that sinfulness is inside the city and the normalcy is on the outside. Where do you stand? Where do we stand? If you're going to be an Orthodox Christian, a right-thinking Christian, you better start thinking correctly. And when you come here and people are making noise and people are not doing the things that they're supposed to do, you can go up to them and tell them, please, pull yourself up a little. I love you. I care about you. Don't you know that we're supposed to be holy here? Some people will say. But, that people will say is part of their journey. Because until they realize it, just like you've realized it, nothing will ever change. You're supposed to submit yourself to Christ, not to me. As I've said numerous times, I am only the stop sign, the yield sign, the U-turn sign. I heard it. I don't know if it's even true. But now they're starting to say they want to remove the U-turn signs because it offends people. I mean, what is going on? Look it up. Trying to change the U-turn signs because it irritates people. How far will we go? How far will we go? Because all the things that are happening because they want people to accept sin. It always happens that way. Accepting sin creates disturbance within the people, and when you have that 20%, again, within society, that 20% gets magnified bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and by the time you're done magnifying it, you have been led astray. That's why you have to have right thinking. You have to be sober-minded, like St. Peter says. Sober-minded. Keeping your mind focused on Christ and His commandments. Solomon says, when I'm going down the street, I'm supposed to be concentrating on the commandments. I'm sitting with my family, I'm supposed to be concentrating on the commandments. When I'm laying in bed, shedding my tears, I'm concentrating on the commandments. What are we doing when we're walking down the road? What are we doing when we're sitting with our children? What are we doing when we're sitting at home? What are we doing? If we're not concentrating on the commandments, and we're not concentrating on Christ, we're fueling that 20%. And the enemy, he just wants to keep you right around that 20% because he knows he's got you. Because if you deny Christ by your lifestyle, you're going to be denied by God. It's not only how you act, it's how you think. It's how you speak. It's how you live. It's every aspect of your life. None of it is exempt from holiness. None of it. And if there's things in your life that don't belong, confess those things and work like hell to get it out of your life. Because if you don't, hell is what's waiting. There's no way around it. Fight the good fight. Run the race. Put on the armor of God. All those things that you read in the scriptures, St. Paul was writing again from a prison cell. Because what he believed, he lived until he got thrown into prison. And he lived until he was somebody took his head. And all those guys that we celebrate today in All Saints, those guys lived a life of exemplary selves. And they lived a life that could only be shadowed by us. Until we rise up and take responsibility for our lives. Because one day, I'm going to tell you right now, you've heard me say it numerous times, one day they will persecute us, whether it's in our lifetime or our children. And if you don't get on it right now before you have children and your children don't understand that, they better understand because they may get the ones to be thrown in prison. And just like those children, years ago at the Columbine shooting, when those guys held a gun to those young children's head and said, deny Christ or I'll shoot you. And those kids said, absolutely no, I will not deny Christ. And they shot him right in the head. Could be our kids. And if we're not ready for it, you don't glorify God for the time that you have with your children every single day, it's going to be gone just like that. Trust the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight.